You have been told the intricate ironwork of our old cities is mere decoration, a relic of a sentimental age. This is the first layer of the illusion. This is not art. It is dormant, inherited technology, a silent, global grid. But this creates an impossible paradox. If their primitive forges created an immortal metal that rust never eats, why does our advanced science produce steel that bleeds into dust? Why was such a superior technology deliberately forgotten? If you've also felt this dissonance, this whisper that something in the official story is broken, leave your trail in the comments. Let us know from where and from when you are watching. We are told these are photographs of our past, but I invite you to look at them not as history, but as evidence. This is a visual crime scene. And you are the jury. Your only instrument of analysis is your own intuition, your innate sense of what is possible and what is a lie. Observe the first exhibit, the paradox of scale. On one side, the artifact, Cyclopean iron gates, their patterns a form of frozen mathematics, a hermetic language of spirals and points, a technology of impossible grace and permanence, designed to last for centuries. The shadows they cast are heavy, ancient. We jump again, a public bandstand in Manila, Philippines, a window grill in Buenos Aires, Argentina, a lamppost in Dublin, Ireland, the same DNA. The same artistic and metallurgical fingerprint. This is not cultural exchange. This is not parallel evolution. This is not a coincidence repeated on a planetary scale. This is evidence of a standardized, centrally produced, and globally distributed system. A kit of parts. The signature of a single, world-spanning empire with a unified technological and cultural template, an empire whose existence has been surgically removed from our memory. The historians of the old world gave it a name now relegated to myth and conspiracy, Tartaria. What we are seeing is not the quaint decor of the Victorian age. We are seeing the ubiquitous, branded infrastructure of a fallen global power. The ironwork is its fossil record, hidden in plain sight. The new inheritors of the earth, the architects of our current timeline, faced a problem. They had inherited a planet filled with the advanced, functioning technology of their predecessors. How do you explain this to a traumatized, amnesiac population? How do you introduce this antiquitech without revealing its true origin? The solution was a masterstroke of psychological warfare and historical engineering, the world's fairs, the great exhibitions. They presented these events as celebrations of a new industrial dawn, showcases of humanity's sudden, miraculous leap forward. You can almost feel the cold, immutable density of the metal through the faded sepia of the photograph. And on the other side, the alleged creators. Small figures in simple clothes, their faces weary. They stand on streets of raw earth and filth, their world defined by the wooden cart and the tired horse. The cognitive dissonance is a physical sensation. It is the jarring incompatibility of a civilization that can barely pave its own roads but can simultaneously forge, transport, and install thousands of tons of mathematically perfect fractal-like ironwork on a global scale. This is not a celebration of industrial might. This is the quiet, unsettling photograph of a far more advanced civilization's ruins being inhabited by a far more primitive one. It is a photograph of a microchip found in a Bronze Age excavation. Look closely at this photograph. Your own eyes are the only tool you need. If you also feel the impossibility of this scene, if you see the technological disconnect, then you understand the depth of the deception. Signal your recognition. Let your, like on this document, serve as a beacon, so that others who are beginning to see may find this evidence. The anomalies are not just in the scale, but in the placement. Our investigation now moves from the macro to the micro, to the details that betray the cover story. The official narrative tells us these were festivals of progress, but the evidence suggests a far more cynical purpose. These fairs were not celebrations, they were showrooms. They were liquidation events for the salvaged inventory of the old world. Look at the photographs of the great fairs in Chicago, Paris, St. Louis, Brussels. We see temporary palaces of glass and iron, structures of such impossible scale and ephemeral beauty that they dwarf anything we build today. We are told they were built in a matter of months, using primitive tools, only to be torn down after the event. This is another logistical impossibility, a fairy tale for children. The forensic conclusion is chillingly simple. They weren't building them, they were unveiling them. They were showcasing the remaining functioning artifacts of the previous civilization, recontextualizing them as new inventions, as products of their own genius. The Eiffel Tower was not an invention. It was a rebranding of a pre-existing energy tower. The Crystal Palace was not a temporary hall. It was a demonstration of a construction technology they could no longer replicate, but could certainly display before it was removed. These fairs were the grandest stage for the greatest lie ever told, a carefully managed introduction of inherited technology, stripped of its original context and function. Let your eyes trace the lines of these iron fences. See how they begin. Not from a stone foundation, not from a logical starting point, but erupting abruptly from the middle of a modern sidewalk. Iron spears rising from the concrete, their lower portions amputated by a new, higher ground level. We are told this is just urban development, but this is evidence of burial. This is the high water mark of a cataclysm, a silent testament to a mud flood that drowned the foundations of the old world, leaving us with only the parts that remained above the mire. Now raise your gaze to the second stories, to the ornate, beautiful iron balconies. But look closer. Many of these balconies serve no purpose. They are platforms to nowhere, attached to solid brick walls where a door should be. Or worse, the door is there, but it is a crude window, its threshold misaligned by several feet, a clumsy alteration made by a later culture that did not understand the original architecture. These are not design flaws. They are scars. They are the clumsy sutures left behind when the inheritors of these buildings tried to adapt a technology they could no longer replicate or even comprehend. And finally, look down at the base of the old lampposts. And what happens at the end of a liquidation sale? The unsold inventory is destroyed to protect the value of what was distributed. The evidence is cleared. Look at the fate of these magnificent fairgrounds. Chicago, 1893. The White City, a breathtaking architectural marvel, almost entirely destroyed by a series of convenient, devastating fires just months after the fair closed. Brussels, 1910. A massive fire consumes entire pavilions. The pattern repeats with an unnerving regularity. These were not accidents. They were acts of demolition. A scorched earth policy for history. It was the systematic erasure of the physical proof, ensuring that these functional, resonant structures could never be studied by a future generation that might ask the wrong questions. It was the final act of the engineering of oblivion, locking away the memory of a world of free energy and interconnected consciousness, and replacing it with our modern world of scarcity, competition, and disconnection. The global empire was not just conquered, it was fragmented, and its memory was burned to the ground. This is not ancient history confined to black and white photographs. This is your immediate environment. The fragmentation of that great empire left behind these metallic orphans, these silent witnesses. We walk past them every day, our minds conditioned by the cover narrative to see them as mere old-fashioned decoration. The true ones. See the intricate ironwork, the flowing organic designs that plunge deep into the ground. Today they are entombed in layers of asphalt and cement, a modern shroud over an ancient root system. These were not simply poles to hold a flame, they were terminals. The visible tips of a buried technological tree, a grid whose roots we have paved over in our engineered ignorance. What you are seeing is not a city that grew. It is a city that was found. A silent, metallic landscape of inherited technology, partially exhumed and fundamentally misunderstood. This is the scene of the crime, and the evidence is everywhere, hiding in plain sight. And so, we arrive at the official explanation, the chapter in the history books designed to neatly package the anomalies and soothe our cognitive dissonance. It is a story told with the straight-faced authority of a tenured professor, a story of progress, of industrial might, of heroic invention. It is also, upon forensic examination, a complete and utter fabrication. A fairy tale. The story they tell us begins in cities like Paris, a sprawling metropolis supposedly remade from the ground up by one man, Baron Haussmann, in less than 2 decades. Between 1853 and 1870, we are told, the medieval city was razed and a modern marvel was erected. We have been programmed to ignore the anomaly. But now you see the pattern. Now you understand the global signature. Look up. Look around you. That balcony, on the corner of the street your parents grew up on, that gate in the old city park you visited as a child, that ornate fence around the oldest building in your town. Do you recognize the signature? Does your city carry these scars of a forgotten grandeur, this impossible ironwork that rust never eats? This is a call to become a field operative in the recovery of our own memory. We ask you to look with new eyes. Notice the patterns, the impossible complexity, the inexplicable resistance to decay. Tell us where you are. Document what you see, because you are not just looking at iron. You are looking at the fragmented pieces of a single, coherent thought. You are touching the physical remnant of a global network. Each gate, each balcony, is a node in a system they tried to make us forget. And by mapping them, we are not just mapping the past, we are redrawing the map of our own potential. And so, the artifacts remained. The impossible ironwork, a silent testament scattered across the globe, became the stage for a new act in the human drama. And with it, a metallic forest of impossible intricacy. Hundreds of thousands of tons of ornate ironwork, cascading from balconies, standing as sentinels at every gate, lining every grand boulevard. The official cause? An explosion of productivity. The magic of the Industrial Revolution. A simple, elegant explanation. And a logistical impossibility. Let us be clear. Wrought iron, the kind we see in this enduring rust-proof metalwork, is not produced like modern steel. It is not poured into molds by the thousand. It is an artisanal process. It is slow. It is brutal. It is resource-intensive. Each piece is worked, hammered, and shaped by skilled hands. The official narrative asks us to believe that a society of men in horse-drawn carts, communicating by written letter, managed to coordinate the mining of millions of tons of ore, the felling of entire forests for charcoal, the operation of thousands of small, inefficient forges, and the training of a legion of master blacksmiths, all to produce and install this custom, bespoke metalwork on a continental scale, simultaneously, from the frozen gates of St. Petersburg to the humid plazas of Buenos Aires. It is a logistical paradox of such staggering proportions that to accept it requires a suspension of disbelief bordering on an act of faith. There are no accounting ledgers that can balance this equation. But the new actors did not know their lines. They did not understand the set. They awoke, as if from a long and troubled sleep, to find themselves tenants in a palace they could not comprehend. This is the great, unspoken tragedy of our age. We are a post-cataclysmic civilization suffering from a profound and engineered amnesia. We walk through the halls of a technological kingdom, yet we believe we live in a mud hut of our own making. This is the very definition of a cargo cult, but on a planetary scale. The term originates from isolated island tribes who, after witnessing military cargo planes land during wartime, began to build mock runways and wooden aircraft, performing rituals in the hope of summoning the sky gods and their material wealth once more. They mimicked the form, but had no access to the function. They had the theater, but not the engine. We are those islanders now. We, the inheritors of the 19th and 20th centuries, are the most sophisticated cargo cult in known history. We found a world seeded with a silent, resonant infrastructure, and in our ignorance, we began to worship the wreckage. Consider the gates and fences, the billions of ornate spires pointing to the heavens. The original design was elegant in its purpose, to comb the ether. There are no records of the colossal workforce required. There is only the finished product, and a cover narrative that crumbles under the slightest pressure. It's a story written for children, not for critical minds. Does this narrative truly satisfy you? Or do you, like us, feel the deep, resonant hum of a lie? Then, to paper over the cracks in this impossible timeline, they give us heroes, a pantheon of great inventors. Men who, we are told, sprang from the era fully formed, conjuring these technological marvels from sheer genius. The poster child for this myth is, of course, Gustav Eiffel, the man who gave his name to the most iconic iron structure on Earth. The narrative presents him as the architect, the visionary, the father of the tower, but the evidence, when viewed without the lens of official history, suggests a far different role. Not an inventor, but a project manager. Not a creator, but a liquidator of inherited technology. The secrets are hidden in the context. The Eiffel Tower was not built as a permanent monument to French ingenuity. It was the centerpiece of the 1889 Exposition Universelle, a World's Fair. And these World's Fairs, as we now begin to understand, were not celebrations of new progress. They were liquidation sales. Each spike, each spear point, was a terminal designed to ionize the atmosphere, to draw in ambient electrical charge and channel it into a subterranean grid. It was a passive energy harvesting system, as natural as a tree drawing sunlight. The survivors, or the new people placed into these empty cities, saw only sharp points. Their minds, reset to a more primitive state of being, could only assign a primitive function. These must be to keep people out, they concluded. And so, a sophisticated piece of atmospheric energy technology was demoted. It became a crude security device. We took a subtle and powerful antenna and rebranded it as a glorified spike, a testament to our own fear and our profound technological illiteracy. We see a crucifix where there was once a conductor. Look to the streetlights. The old photographs show them standing alone, proud and unadorned by wires. They were not lamps. They were tuning forks. They were designed to resonate at a specific frequency, exciting the very air around them into luminescence. They drew their power from the earth beneath them and the ether around them, bathing the cities in a clean, harmonious glow. When we found them, they were silent. The grid was broken. And what was our solution? We, the clever mimics, did what any cargo cult would do. They were showrooms for the technological remnants of a prior age, presented to a dazed and amnesiac public as novelties, as wonders of the new age. The tower itself, with its lattice structure optimized for atmospheric energy resonance, bears all the hallmarks of a pre-existing design, a component of a global energy grid. Eiffel and his company did not invent it. They found the plans, they possessed the components, and they led the team that assembled it. They took a functional piece of advanced, inherited technology, likely a transmission or broadcast tower, and repurposed it as a tourist attraction. It is a perfect textbook example of a cargo cult. A society finding the advanced artifacts of their predecessors and, failing to understand their true function, integrating them into their own primitive rituals. In this case, the ritual of tourism and national pride. The genius was not in the engineering, but in the marketing, the rebranding. The act of taking a piece of a forgotten, functional world and selling it back to the inheritors of that world as a mere decoration. And so the story goes. Impossible timelines are explained away by a mythical industrial boom. Impossible structures are explained away by mythical, solitary geniuses. Every piece of contradictory evidence is either ignored or assigned a hero's name. We defiled them. We drilled holes into their perfect forms and ran crude pipes of hissing gas. Then, when we invented electricity, we festooned them with ugly, drooping cables, shackling them to a loud, inefficient, and polluting power system. We took a wireless resonator and turned it into a clumsy pole for a bare bulb, celebrating our own regression as a mark of progress. We perform a ritual of imitation, lighting a candle in the shadow of a forgotten sun. But the most insidious ritual, the one that perfectly encapsulates our collective amnesia, is the act of painting the iron. Generation after generation, we are taught this sacred duty. We must apply thick coats of paint to protect the metal from the elements, to stop the dreaded rust. It has become a civic virtue, a sign of a well-maintained property. But this is the ultimate act of the cargo cult, a ritual based on a complete misunderstanding. This inherited iron, this lost Tartarian alloy, does not rust in the same way our inferior modern steel does. It was engineered for permanence. The paint is not an act of preservation. It is an act of desecration. It is a ritual of deactivation. Every layer of paint we apply is a layer of insulation. It is a shroud that smothers the metal's latent energetic properties. They have given us a script, a comfortable, linear story of humanity, pulling itself up by its bootstraps, from mud huts to iron palaces in the blink of an eye. But we, the forensic investigators of this narrative crime, must look at what is not there. The great silence in the evidence. Where are the vast, sprawling foundries that would have blackened the skies of Europe? Where are the design catalogs, the universal templates that gave this ironwork its strangely uniform, global aesthetic? Where are the records of the supply chains, the armies of workers, the mountains of fuel? They do not exist. We are shown the glorious final act, but the first two acts of the play are completely missing. We are left with a conclusion that is as disturbing as it is inescapable. This vast, rustless, technological skeleton was not forged in the 19th century. It was found. It was inherited. And the story of the Industrial Revolution, the story of Haussmann, the story of Eiffel, it is nothing more than an elaborate, carefully constructed ghost story, told to convince the orphans they built the mansion they merely woke up in. The question is, how long will we continue to believe in ghosts? They have given us a story. A romantic, heroic tale of soot-stained entrepreneurs and muscular blacksmiths, forging a new world from fire and iron under the banner of the Industrial Revolution. We are meticulously and dutifully neutralizing the last vestiges of the old world grid, severing its connection to the atmosphere. We do this while telling ourselves we are being responsible. It is the perfect mechanism of control, to convince the prisoner to reinforce his own cell walls, believing it is for his own protection. The engineering of forgetting is at its most potent when it becomes a cherished tradition. We are not protecting the iron, we are silencing it, ensuring its secrets remain dormant, its true function a mystery locked away beneath 100 years of lead-based paint and ignorance. We live our lives surrounded by the fossilized remains of a superior technology, a technology that promised free, limitless energy and a connection to the world that we can no longer even imagine. We have repurposed their power plants into museums, their resonant cathedrals into houses of silent prayer, and their atmospheric energy network into decorative fencing. We are orphans, playing with the tools of our dead parents, using a quantum computer as a paperweight and a star map as a placemat. The dissonant feeling you have, that sense that the world doesn't quite add up, is not a flaw in your thinking. It is a flicker of cellular memory, a ghost in your own machine, remembering a time when things were different. It's a narrative we are taught to admire, a cornerstone of our modern identity. But we are not here for stories, we are here for the audit. The time has come to set aside the poetry of progress and examine the cold, hard mathematics of the ledger. Because in the unforgiving realm of logistics, the official narrative does not simply fray at the edges, it suffers a catastrophic systemic collapse. Let us begin with a single, immutable equation, a law of 19th century physics and economics, as solid as the iron itself. To produce 1 ton of wrought iron, the high-quality, corrosion-resistant metal we see in these impossible structures, required, at a minimum, 2 tons of coking coal and approximately 120 hours of intensive, skilled human labor. This is not a theory. This is the baseline reality of their stated technology. 1 ton of iron, 2 tons of coal, 120 man-hours. Remember these numbers. They are the weapon that dismantles the lie. Now, let us conduct a forensic accounting exercise on a single, modest location, the French Quarter of New Orleans, a place renowned for its delicate, intricate, and ubiquitous ironwork. Balconies, gates, fences, verandas. Conservative estimates, based on material density and sheer volume, place the mass of this legacy ironwork in the tens of thousands of tons. A time when humanity was not a cargo cult. If this vision of an amnesiac humanity, of a species living in the shadow of its own forgotten greatness, resonates with you, if you feel this quiet grief for a world you never knew but somehow remember, then check that you are subscribed. We need awakened minds around here. The great silence is only broken when the survivors of the amnesia begin to recognize one another. We are a species with amnesia. But memory is not lost like a misplaced key. It is stolen. It is murdered. To erase the memory of a global civilization, you cannot simply let it fade. You must shatter its foundations, burn its libraries, and poison the minds of the survivors. You must orchestrate a reset so brutal, so absolute, that the past becomes not just a foreign country, but an impossible myth. The mechanism was twofold. First, the physical event, the Great Silencing. This was not a gentle decline. It was a planetary-scale act of violence. Call it a mud flood, a liquefaction event, a frequency-induced cataclysm. The name is irrelevant to the victims. Imagine a low, pervasive hum that builds in the earth, a sound that resonates not in the ears, but in the bones, a frequency that turns solid ground into a churning, liquid nightmare. For the sake of argument, let's use a low, defensible figure. Let us say 30,000 tons. A fraction of what likely exists, but a number we can work with. Let us apply our equation. 30,000 tons of ironwork. To produce this, the city of New Orleans and its surrounding territories would have needed to procure, transport, and burn 60,000 tons of coal. Visualize this. 60,000 tons. It is not a pile. It is a mountain. It is a fleet of barges choking the Mississippi. It is an endless train of horse-drawn wagons, sinking into the mud of unpaved streets, day after day, year after year. The logistics of moving this much fuel alone, with the primitive transport of the era, represents a monumental undertaking that would have paralyzed the regional economy. Where are the records for this colossal movement of energy? Where are the contracts, the shipping manifests, the bills of lading for a mountain of coal that would have dwarfed every other commodity in the city? There is only a profound and unnerving silence, the great silence of an impossible supply chain. Now consider the human cost. 30,000 tons of iron at 120 hours per ton equals 3,600,000 man-hours of labor. The foundations of the world's great cities, the subterranean conduits of the energy grid, were not just buried, they were violently severed. The earth itself was weaponized against its inheritors. This baptism of mud drowned the old world, swallowing entire city levels, snapping the metallic web of the grid, and leaving behind a silent, half-buried necropolis. The intricate ironwork, once humming with power, became inert metal skeletons, reaching out from their own graves. The crime scene was now set. But physical destruction is not enough. Scars remain. Survivors remember. So the second phase was deployed, the engineering of forgetting. As the mud settled, a new class of inheritors emerged from the chaos. The parasites, the controllers. They were not builders. They were salvagers and storytellers. Their primary objective was not to rebuild, but to rebrand the wreckage. This was the great intellectual crime, a controlled demolition of history itself, an archival burn on a global scale. Records of the former age, its science, its philosophy, its true history, were systematically hunted and purged. In their place, a new narrative was meticulously crafted, a cover story. They called it the Industrial Revolution. They took the inherited infrastructure of the fallen civilization and claimed it as their own primitive invention. They conjured heroic figures from thin air, the captains of industry, the geniuses of steam and steel, to be the fictional fathers of a technology they could barely comprehend. This is not the work of unskilled men digging ditches. This is the highly specialized, physically grueling work of master blacksmiths, puddlers, and foundrymen. 3.6 million hours. If you had an army of 1,000 skilled artisans working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, with no holidays, no sick days, and no interruptions, it would take them nearly 2 years of continuous, back-breaking labor to produce the iron for this single neighborhood. And this raises the next logistical paradox. Where did this army of 1,000 master craftsmen come from? Where were they housed in a city of wooden shanties and dirt roads? How were they fed? An army of this size requires its own logistical tale, a city within a city, dedicated solely to sustaining the workforce. It would require farms, butchers, bakers, and brewers all working in concert to support the industrial effort. The construction of the ironwork would have been the single largest economic and social undertaking in the city's history. It would have been the only thing anyone talked or wrote about. Its scale would have been legendary. Yet, again, the historical record is astoundingly quiet. The ledgers are empty. The diaries are silent. The evidence is not there. We are shown the magnificent final product, but we are never, ever shown the factory floor. The magnificent, rust-proof ironwork of the Tartarian network was explained away as mere Victorian decoration, the work of men with coal forges and horse-drawn carts. It is a mathematical and logistical absurdity, a fairy tale told to children who have forgotten they once lived in a castle. The final act of this intellectual sabotage was the most insidious. To ensure the old grid could never be reactivated, they had to suppress the materials themselves. The patent for stainless steel in the early 20th century was not an act of invention, it was an act of suppression. A deliberate introduction of an inferior, corruptible metal designed to rust, to decay, to fail. It locked us into a cycle of planned obsolescence and perpetual dependency, ensuring we would forever be rebuilding our world with inferior materials, never suspecting that the superior version was already all around us, silently mocking our supposed progress. They gave us rust and called it the future. This is the mechanism of silence, a 1-2 punch of physical cataclysm and psychological warfare. They buried the truth in mud, then cemented it over with a fabricated history. They built our current reality on the tomb of a giant. But they made one mistake. They left the evidence in plain sight. They believed we would never learn to see it for what it is. And this was not an isolated event. This same anomaly, this same mathematical impossibility, was occurring simultaneously across the entire planet. From the boulevards of Haussmann's Paris to the plazas of Buenos Aires, from the gardens of St. Petersburg to the town squares of remote Australian settlements, each city a new logistical black hole, each demanding its own mountains of coal, its own armies of ghost artisans, its own non-existent supply chains. When you multiply the New Orleans calculation by the hundreds of cities displaying this identical architectural DNA, the numbers become astronomical. They leave the realm of improbability and enter the realm of physical and economic fantasy. The official narrative asks us to believe in a global, synchronized, artisanal manufacturing miracle that occurred without fuel, without a workforce, and without leaving a single accounting record. This is not history. It is a cover narrative. The forensic conclusion becomes inescapable when you ask the most critical question of all: where are the foundries? An industrial operation of this magnitude would leave scars on the earth. We should find the ruins of gigantic forges, blast furnaces that would have lit up the night sky for miles. We should find mountains of slag, the toxic byproduct of iron production, dumped in the surrounding countryside. We should find entire regions deforested to feed the ravenous coke ovens. Silence is their most powerful weapon. It is time we made our voices theirs. Share this knowledge. It is not just a theory, it is an act of forensic remembrance. Send this to everyone who is still asleep. It is time to wake them up. And so, we arrive at the final, quiet horror. We are a species with amnesia, living as tenants in a house built by giants. We walk on their buried streets, we inhabit their repurposed buildings, and we stare at the magnificent, impossible ironwork that laces our cities. We polish their railings, we mend their rooftops, and we call their functional infrastructure art. We are a civilization of orphans, surrounded by the technological bones of our ancestors, and we have been taught to call these bones decorative stones. This is the ultimate expression of the control matrix. To convince a prince he was born a pauper, and to make him grateful for the scraps from a table that is rightfully his. This rust-free ironwork is more than an architectural anomaly. It is a daily, silent indictment of our engineered forgetting. The corrosion they failed to induce on the surface of these structures, they have successfully cultivated within the architecture of our minds. The rust we do not see on the metal is a perfect mirror for the rust that devours our memory, our potential, our very identity. These are not things that can be hidden. They are permanent industrial footprints. Yet, they are missing. The backstage of the Industrial Revolution is an empty stage. There are no props, no machinery, no evidence that the play we were told about ever took place. We are left with a vacuum of evidence. A void where the world's largest and most sophisticated manufacturing and logistics network should be. And into this void, only one logical hypothesis can fit. These intricate, impossibly resilient pieces of iron were not forged in the primitive, coal-fired hearths of the 19th century. They were not hammered into shape by men in leather aprons. They were the product of a different system entirely. An advanced, integrated global manufacturing system belonging to a prior civilization. A system capable of creating and distributing these components on a planetary scale. The patterns are not merely similar. They are often identical, suggesting the use of standardized molds or templates, or perhaps a technology we would barely recognize, like sonic frequency molding or additive metal printing. The men of the 19th century were not the manufacturers. They were the inheritors, the salvage crew, the assemblers of a vast, pre-packaged infrastructure kit left behind by their technologically superior ancestors. The math does not lie. The numbers present a logistical paradox that cannot be resolved by the official story. They have sold us a narrative of linear progress, a comforting bedtime story where we are the heroes, the pinnacle of evolution. But the evidence whispers a different, colder truth. We are not the climax of the story. We are the epilogue, written by the victors of a war we don't even remember fighting. Our identity is not our own. It is a costume given to us after the true owners of the stage were forcefully removed. We are not pioneers charting a new course. We are squatters, performing rituals of maintenance, painting the unrusting iron, on machines whose true purpose we have been conditioned to fear. But to recognize this, to feel the cold cognitive dissonance of it in your very soul, is not an act of despair. It is the first act of defiance. It is the beginning of the awakening. Each gate, each lamppost, each spire is not a relic to be passively admired from behind a velvet rope. It is a key. It is a piece of a grand, scattered puzzle. And the image this puzzle forms is not of our past, but of a future of limitless potential and sovereign energy that was stolen from our bloodline. Reclaiming that knowledge is not about archaeology. It is about reclaiming our dignity. They demand a new explanation, one that fits the physical and economic evidence we see before us and acknowledges the profound silence we find in the archives. We are told to believe in an explosion of productivity, but we see no evidence of the explosion, only the scattered, beautiful debris. If you can reconcile this glaring anomaly, if you can produce the ledgers that account for the millions of tons of coal and the billions of man-hours, the floor is yours. The mathematics, however, remain unforgiving. They are the silent, unyielding witness to a crime of historical erasure, and they testify not to what was built, but to what was found. The numbers refuse to bend. The timeline refuses to stretch. The audit of the Industrial Revolution yields only a logistical paradox, an equation where the solution is a quiet, resounding impossibility. We have established that the sheer volume of this ornate, impossibly resilient ironwork could not have been forged within the official narrative. The factories are missing, the fuel accounts are a void, the workforce is a phantom. This forces the forensic investigator to ask the next logical question. If these artifacts were not manufactured in the 19th century, then where did they come from? The answer is not found in a single location, but in all of them, simultaneously. It is about remembering who and what we truly are. The investigation does not stop here. It has only just begun. If you feel the call to continue unearthing the truth, to scrape away the rust from our collective memory, then you know the protocol. This is not a channel. It is a rally point for the sentinels of a forgotten age. Subscribe. Activate the signal. Welcome to the resistance. It is an answer that shatters the very concept of national borders and isolated cultures. It is the ghost of a global, unified civilization. Prepare for a sense of geographic vertigo. We are told that the world of the late 1800s was a patchwork of distinct empires and fledgling nations, each with its own unique aesthetic, its own technological pace. This is a foundational lie of the control matrix. Let us test it. We stand first in the biting wind of the Neva in St. Petersburg, Russia. Before us is a gate of staggering complexity, its iron spirals and florons a testament to czarist grandeur. Now, in an instant, we are transported halfway across the globe to the humid air of the American South in Charleston, South Carolina. We look at a balcony, weathered by a different climate, a different history. And yet, the design is identical. The same geometric signature, the same flourishes, the same impossible purity of the metal. The dissonance is immediate. Let's accelerate. We leap to Melbourne, Australia, a city supposedly born from a penal colony, a rough outpost in a new world. And there it is again. The same cast iron lacework on a veranda, a pattern that has no business being there, a technological echo of a place thousands of miles and a world of culture away.